Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you for coming back in such a timely way. I hope you had your coffee, water, or whatever else it was. I was talking to Jill Sackler just a moment ago, and she said, what an incredible crowd, how well populated the room is, from all over, and it's really true. So could you give yourselves, just to get the blood flowing, a round of applause? So let's do just a little bit of rewind. You know, we used to say rewind the videotape. There's no videotape anymore, but we'll pretend there is, to think back just a bit and reflect on what's been discussed today, especially this morning a bit, in the Communicating Science Effectively document that we discussed. To help launch the research recommended in that report, the Colloquium Organizing Committee here issued a call for proposals pitching collaborative science communication research ideas aligned with the study's research agenda. The two most promising proposals were chosen for presentation at the Colloquium, that would be here, with the goal of eliciting reactions and sparking new ideas. So one proposal is the topic of this session, and we'll hear about the other one tomorrow. So today we have the research project called Evidence-Based Science Communication to Policymakers. Evidence-based science communication to policymakers. The snarky Washington in me wants to say good luck, but I know that we can do this. This will be presented by three members of the project team. Liz Suhay is an assistant professor of government at American University. Emily Cloyd is project director for public engagement at the American Association for the Advancement of Science and was, this is the coolest thing, and was a contestant on Jeopardy. So she has all the answers. In 2012, when Erin Nash lived in Australia, she was a wildland firefighter. She's now an advanced doctoral candidate at Durham University. So this is quite a team, pretty impressive, and they can take anything on. Now afterwards, our discussants here will take 3 minutes each, the clock will be ticking, to share their thoughts about the collaboration and the research idea. And we're pleased to be joined by Jim Cohen. He's Director of Communications and Public Outreach for the Kavli Foundation, which I know very well and I'm very fond of. Faye Cook, the Assistant Director for the Directorate of Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences at the National Science Foundation. And David Herring, the Program Manager of Communications, Education, and Engagement Division at NOAA's Climate Office. So these are some pretty tough judges, you know. I mean, we're going to take this show on the road. So Emily, Elizabeth, Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll take my seat, and we are anxious to see what you've got to say and present.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Cloyd. I'm the Project Director for Public Engagement at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I'm very excited to be here today with my collaborators, Liz Suhay, Erin Nash, and in the audience, Erin Heath. And I wanted to thank the National Academy of Sciences and the Reed Allen Foundation for funding this project. AAAS has been conducting communicating science workshops since 2008. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten during those workshops is that scientists want more information on how to communicate with policymakers and how to engage them. So in the spring of 2016, AAAS was interested in creating a new module for our workshops that would really focus on how to engage policymakers. And to do that, we recruited Liz, who then brought on Erin Nash. She had met Erin at an interdisciplinary conference to produce a literature review that we could use to inform our module. It was a very successful project. We really enjoyed working together. We got a nice literature review. And we talked about how we might work together in the future, but it seemed unlikely because there was very little support for this sort of collaboration. Until the National Academies announced their researcher practitioner competition. While we were preparing our policymaker module, we found that the subject was a bit understudied. And it turns out we weren't the only ones to notice. NAS's recent Researcher Practitioner Grant Competition sought proposals that would address priorities in the Communicating Science Effectively report. At 137 pages, only 4 of those pages were devoted to the topic of communication with policymakers. This wasn't due to a shortcoming of the report or to the authors or downplaying the importance of the topic, but rather, as the report says, there is a paucity of evidence on effective practices and structures for affecting policymakers' understanding, perception, and use of science. For our project, we wanted to increase engagement with and the use of quality science in the policymaking process. We know there's widespread concern that the body tasked with making federal law, the US Congress, too often does not engage enough with the scientific community. And so we want to really increase policymakers' engagement with and use of quality science. There are many reasons why policymakers may or may not engage with the science, and we are not under any illusion that our project is going to produce the magic bullet. We do believe at this moment in time it is all hands on deck. We believe there is room for improvement with regards to the communication practices of scientists and science communicators as they engage with policymakers. To help illustrate our point, even given the growth of the academic field of the science of science communication, we found in a recent survey of scientific organizations that only about 20% provide their members with suggested practices for communicating with policymakers. Our ultimate goal with this project is to provide an initial set of recommended practices for communicating science to policymakers. These recommendations will be based on findings from a multifaceted project that begins with a synthesis of the existing research on this topic and then proceeds to original empirical research that will proceed in several stages. To make the project tractable, we needed to limit its scope. We do so in 2 ways. First, the policymakers on which we focus are current and former members of Congress and their staff. Second, we focus on communication about physical and natural sciences. And as part of the project, we will also consider whether our recommendations are likely to apply to the communication of social science. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Erin, and she'll tell you more.
Hello, everyone. My name's Erin Nash, and I'm the research associate on the project. I'm a philosopher, which might be a bit odd, but I work at the interface of philosophy of science and political philosophy. I also have a background in science, and I used to work for government on policy and analysing policy and communicating science and science-informed policymaking to policymakers, and in the summer I got to fight fires. So to date, those interested in improving communication to policymakers have generally had to rely on studies of scientific communication and engagement with the general public. This is because, as Emily has told us, not much is known about how policymakers, as a specific subpopulation, form their beliefs about science or scientific information. Although policymakers and the general public share many similarities, there are also some important differences between the general population and policymakers. So policymakers are more exposed than the average person to multiple channels of information, including actors with deep political motivations. Second, elected officials have greater access than the average person to sources of specialist information, such as the testimony of experts, and information and analyses that the Congressional Research Service, for example, provides. Third, representatives and their staff routinely take into account strategic political considerations when forming their policy preferences. And moreover, given that policymakers' decisions are vital to the health of our society, and that elite cues are one of the most powerful influences on the general public's beliefs about scientific issues and their attitudes towards science-informed policy, attention to policymakers as a particular group is an especially important gap to help fill in the literature. So we've designed our project to be multimodal, to give us a multi-dimensional perspective on this issue. The first component is a review and synthesis of the existing literature. We obviously don't want to reinvent the wheel, so we're currently mining this literature for what is already known, about the nature of scientific communication to policymakers, even though this is a relatively small body of literature.
I'm going to advance your slide.
Oh, thanks.
There you go.
Oh, thank you very much. We're also summarising research on the communication of science more broadly, where we think these findings are likely to apply to policymakers too. We're building on the literature review we completed together 12 months ago and reviewing two key types of literature: the academic literature from a diverse array of disciplines, and second, we're collecting literature from science and science communications-based organisations, such as guidance material that has already been developed to provide scientists and communicators with advice on how best to communicate science with policymakers. The remaining components are our original empirical studies. The second component develops a better understanding of the practices of those who communicate science to policymakers. We'll be doing this via a surveying a representative sample of people within policy and government relations teams of the 250 scientific organisations that are affiliated with the SSCIII, together with members of these organisations, like scientists. We'll be asking questions like, who is most likely to engage with policymakers? Who is communicating with whom? What information is communicated? How and with what goals in mind? What sorts of ethical concerns people think through before they head to the Hill? And whether science communicators perceive their communication to be impactful, and how they define success. The third component is an influence mapping study, which aims to provide a better understanding of how macro-scale structures and environments, rather than just the micro-scale practices, affect policymakers' perceptions and understandings and use of scientific information. And these maps will provide a descriptive picture of the pipelines through which information, knowledge, and sometimes misinformation flow. The final component is an exploration of policymakers' perspectives on science communication. We'll be conducting semi-structured qualitative interviews with 20 to 30 members of Congress, and we'll be contrasting different case studies where the science underlying empirical claims are contested or politicized with those where we see much lower levels of contestation. We'll be asking these members who they actively seek out and why, who they trust and find credible and why, and who they don't trust and find credible and why. So several criteria will be used to select these interviewees, such as partisan balance, whether members sit on congressional committees that frequently engage with science, or whether they regularly consider legislation that scientific evidence is relevant to. So time permitting, we also hope to interview staffers of the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Research Service, and the Congressional Budget Office, all of whom regularly provide science-based information to members of Congress and their staff, and who are under professional obligations to prevent disinformation and evidence in ways that are non-partisan and objective. So the findings of our research in each component will inform the development of the recommended practices for communicating science to policymakers, and we hope to further evaluate these recommended practices in subsequent research efforts. And I'll pass over to Liz. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about our process on this project, and I want to thank Erin for walking through our research design. You can see that there are a number of components that are going to be keeping us busy, and I want to say now, and I'll repeat this at the end, that we're very interested in feedback. You know, obviously we'll get feedback from the discussants, but we're also interested in audience feedback and feedback from those out there online as well. So I'm Liz Suhay, I'm the PI, And for those of you who are contemplating this sort of collaboration, we thought we would share some tips that have served us well. This isn't necessarily a blueprint, but so far our team organization and our approach really has led to a successful collaboration. So what I want to talk to you first is our organization. So what we chose to do is we chose to put the researcher as the head PI. And what that meant was that I was the primary author of the proposal and I act as project manager. I'm also going to be managing the creation of the various scholarly products with primary writing responsibility for a report that's going to be submitted to the national academies. And I'm also responsible for two components of the project that particularly reflect my expertise, which is the survey of scientists and the interviews with policymakers. My AAAS colleagues, you may not be too surprised, they're going to be in charge of the more applied and practice-oriented products, and I'm going to talk about those in a moment. And they're also assisting with the original research, however, in accord with their expertise. Emily is going to be assisting with the survey of scientists, and Erin Heath with the policymaker interviews. Erin Nash, you just heard from, her primary responsibility is the literature review, and she also is overseeing the influence mapping component. And Erin's been very busy. She's also managing a graduate student team, and they are out there somewhere. Sarah Yagena from Stony Brook and Nathan Lee from Stanford, who bring their own expertise to this project, including automated text analysis and policy expertise. So that's our organization. Whatever organization you choose, we would say that it's incredibly important that people have quite well-defined roles, and that really helps with this sort of collaboration. A little bit of advice with respect to our approach. And some of this we're going to be repeating what others have said, so I won't belabor these points, but it's really essential that when you're working across the researcher-practitioner divide, when you're working across disciplines, that you have genuine respect for one another, genuine curiosity for other people's profession, other people's disciplines helps as well. One of the tough things about this is it really can't be manufactured, right? So it helps to work with people that you're going to have respect for and curiosity for what they're up to. We are also committed to democratic decision-making. This sounds perhaps cumbersome, but we believe if well-managed, it's not. We have twice monthly meetings via Skype, during which we update one another on our progress and confer about important decisions. And this may sound really radical, but we've decided that we're going to make decisions by consensus. So that's also not as difficult as it sounds. We don't always agree on the right course of action. Where there is some disagreement, we tend to defer to the person with the most relevant expertise or experience. So another item that I want to talk about that so far has proven to be quite helpful for us is we put together a volunteer advisory board. And given the importance of this project, the difficulty of this project, and the fact that it is multidisciplinary and certainly disciplines beyond what's represented in our team, we put together these individuals. We have individuals represented from across the sciences, social sciences, and humanities, and we also have individuals from the policymaking community. I want to mention, in this polarized era, this board is bipartisan. So that's something that we were attentive to. And I just want to take a moment here to thank these individuals. We're tremendously grateful and sort of surprised, actually, that we have all these great folks that joined our team. It's just tremendous collective expertise. So let me talk a little bit about our final products. We're at the beginning stage of this research. We are going to be working towards scholarly products and some more applied products, and we have an event planned. So with respect to scholarly products, I mentioned a report to NAS. We'll have scholarly articles coming, and of course we'll be sharing our findings more broadly via academic blogs, and there's been a lot of talk about the conversation today. The conversation was actually in our grant, so we're a big fan of that venue. My AAAS colleagues are going to be using findings from their research in several ways, and they're going to be updating and expanding their science policy training programs for scientists and engineers as well as students. They are going to be expanding resources available in their fellowship programs, including the Leshner Leadership Institute for Public Engagement with Science program. And finally, they're going to be sharing materials through a variety of networks, so they're not just keeping this in-house. So they're going to be sharing the information with their 250-plus affiliate societies. A final stage of this particular phase of our research is an event. We believe in community building, and we're going to disseminate our findings at an event at American University Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies. And if you want to attend, drop me a line. It'll be next fall. Okay, so I also want to mention...
1 minute.
Sorry, I want to mention that this is a first stage of our research, and the recommended practices we're putting together, we do plan to test experimentally, and we'll be applying for additional funding for that phase. So that is all I have. Thank you very much to everybody here, and we look forward to your comments.